Hello, and thank you for joining me today. You're here with Data Science Teacher Brandyn, and we're going to talk about the Conditional Kernel Density Estimate plot in Seaborn. So it is really just based off the kernel density estimation, the KDE plot. A little bit more complex, I guess, in some senses, but it is really based off that, and then we're doing some kind of Seaborn stuff. Okay, so not one of the more simpler, kind of cooler things that you can do in Seaborn for sure. So one of the first things, really to get the full effect of this plot, it's really good to set the white grid style. So set theme white grid. Now, if you don't do this, it won't look terrible, but it certainly adds a little bit of the opacity to the color, so a little bit of the transparency, and adds nice edges around this. It really just makes this specific plot look really good. I don't know if I love white grid for general plotting, but for this one, it really works well. Yes, we're using the diamonds dataset. This is available in Seaborn as well. I'm sure you can find it on Kaggle if not. So here we're going to do a dis plot. So sns.displot, data frame, data equals data frame, x equals caret, cut. Okay, so just two guys. Just notice this is an object in the hue, like it usually is, and x is a continuous variable. Okay, so the specific plot it works really well with continuous variables. Okay, so here we see the KDE. We're just going to set kind of kernel density estimation, like I was saying. This is really based on that. We're going to fill or multiple. We're going to kind of fill them on top of each other essentially. We're going to clip 0 to none. The palette. So this is, if you look at the documentation, this is what they give you, sort of thing. A little bit confusing, but the CH there stands for the chroma. So chroma kind of palette color and stuff like that. I found another way to do that a little bit more how I normally use this. The rotation is -25, so they're just kind of tilting the color palette a little bit. And this is how you get truly a lot of different colors, the hue and then the light, kind of a little bit easier. Light, we'll see how I use it right here. I did the same thing as the documentation, but I use the cubehelix palette, okay? And I prefer using the Seaborn palette. So you end up having a lot more control over your overall palette. It does work a little bit differently than the documentation's kind of not shortcut string, but short form string. It is really the same way of doing the exact same thing. Okay. So here we're going to set 5 colors. The starting point, you can choose 1, 2, or 3. And it's really just, in the color palette where we're going to start, and you'll be able to rotate that a little bit. I mean, I would advise looking at their documentation to get a sense of how that color palette sets up, so you can understand a little bit better how rotate minus or positive will affect it. But I'll show you how, if you don't want to go to the documentation, how you can do something. For the light and dark argument in the cubehelix pattern, this is setting how dark or how bright is the dark color, and how dark or how bright is the light color. So this is not really like the whole palette darker, the whole palette lighter. It's just changing one of the colors. And I'll show you again how you can play with this to get really the effect that you want. You'll find somewhere in the middle range is usually what you want for both of them. Usually one on the lower side, one on the higher side. But you never usually set them to 1 or 0. It's never usually, really, my experience has been that it doesn't look good when you set to the rotation. So doing the same thing here, and then setting the palette, and we get this nice kind of kernel density, many kernel densities, the conditional side being on the condition of ideal, we're going to put this color. On the condition of premium, we're going to set this color, and so on and so on. Okay, and like so on and so on. It looks pretty good. I think it looks really quite cool. It's a really interesting looking plot. Okay, in the next one, so just showing you a slightly different thing, playing around with this, I just changed the starting number to 0. I changed the different clarity, but changed the starting to 0. Rotation equals 0.4, so just kind of rotating it the other way of the palette, and playing around with the dark and light palette. So one of the ways, if you don't know how to play with this, if you're not sure, and I honestly find Seaborn palettes they're not hard to use, but you really kind of have to play with them to know how to use them. Or what you can do is use this choose cubehelix palette, right? So what you're going to do is you're going to set light, and so let's just play around with one of these. The end colors are going to change the number of colors that we have. The starting point, you can set this at anyone. You can see it changes where we're starting. It changes the palette of the cubehelix, where we're going to start, and kind of the colors we're going to get. Pretty interesting to play around with. The rotation is kind of again, rotating it forward or backwards sort of thing. And so you can see I went up and then I rotated it back a little bit. So it kind of looks not exactly the same color, but you kind of get a little of the sense it's going back in that direction. Okay, so I went up by 1 and then I rotated back a little bit. And this is kind of how you get the fine tuning. Okay, gamma is just the overall intensity. Hue is the, I want to say the brightness, truthfully, of the coloring. Okay, it's not, you can see how much more pale, how much kind of gray shade and stuff. It's not the hue argument in pandas, it's the hue, like the regular hue color. And then light and dark, just to play with this one, so it's 0.85 on the light. Let's go turn that down to 0.2. See what happens. You can see it just gets completely kind of dark. It's the darkest, it's still just as dark. But we generally would make more sense for the light to be on the high side. Right here, 0.9. You can see it gets quite light now on the light side. And this is really, again, the light and the dark are the intensity of the dark. And so if you were to turn dark up to 80 or 0.8, you're going to see here is going to be a kind of pale color type of palette. So you can set them both quite high, maybe something like a 40 or something like that might look okay. Okay, so you can play with it. It looks kind of interesting, I guess. Maybe not the best color palette though. It's really cool to play around with this, but this allows you to just an incredible amount of flexibility when you're playing around with the kernel, or so the conditional kernel density estimates. Okay? Thank you very much for joining me today, and I will see you.